The night I found out my entire life had been flipped upside down didn't start with a warning. It didn't come with a call, a message, or even a whisper. It started with a simple envelope waiting for me on my front porch after I came home from deployment. An envelope with my name printed neatly on the front, like it held nothing more than a routine bill or a friendly notice. But inside that envelope was the start of a nightmare I never saw coming. A nightmare built on signatures I never made, loans I never asked for, and a staggering $500,000 debt tied to my name. $500,000. A number that didn't even feel real. And worse than that, it was my own family who put me in it. Coming home after serving overseas was supposed to be peaceful. I thought the biggest thing I'd face was readjusting to normal life again, sleeping in my own bed, eating real food, hearing silence instead of constant noise. I was ready for that kind of challenge. But what I wasn't ready for was betrayal. Real, raw betrayal from the people I'd grown up trusting. The people who were supposed to protect me when I wasn't home. The people I sent money to, checked on, and prayed for every night when I was thousands of miles away. The moment I saw that first letter, I felt my stomach twist. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Some kind of error, maybe a mix-up with another person who shared my name. But as I kept opening letter after letter, each one stamped with red warnings and phrases like final notice, urgent response required, and delinquent account, my hands started shaking. There were credit cards I didn't recognize, personal loans that made no sense, and purchases large enough to make my head spin. Furniture I never saw. A car I never drove. Even a whole home renovation loan that I didn't know existed. At first, I didn't want to believe what the paperwork clearly showed. I didn't want to accept the reality forming right in front of me. But as I looked at the signatures that looked nothing like mine, the truth hit me harder than anything I'd felt overseas. Someone had been signing documents under my name while I was gone. Someone who knew I wouldn't be there to check my mail. Someone who knew I wouldn't be able to question anything. Someone who had access to my personal information. The thought made my chest tighten. And even before I confronted anyone, even before I asked the first question, a part of me already knew who was behind it. My family. The people I loved the most. My mom had mentioned money problems a year before I deployed, but she brushed it off so quickly I barely thought about it again. My older brother had always been irresponsible with bills, constantly borrowing money and promising to pay it back. And my aunt, well, she'd always thought I owed the family for being the one who made it out with a stable job and steady income. None of it seemed dangerous at the time. Annoying, sure. Stressful, sometimes. But never something that would evolve into this level of betrayal. But now, standing in my living room surrounded by stacks of papers, late notices and loan agreements, I realized all those small red flags had been warnings I didn't pay attention to. Warnings that turned into the biggest financial trap of my life. I tried to sit down, but my legs felt weak. I started flipping through the pages looking for dates that lined up with the exact months I was deployed overseas, months when I wasn't even in the country. That's when it stopped being a suspicion and became the truth I could no longer escape. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was planned. Carefully. Quietly. And done with the confidence that I wouldn't find out until it was too late. I remember the moment I picked up my phone. My hand hovered over my mom's contact. I wanted to believe she didn't know anything. I wanted to think maybe she was tricked too. But deep down, there was this uncomfortable heaviness in my chest telling me she knew. Or if she didn't sign anything herself, she knew someone around her did. Still, I didn't call her. Not yet. Instead, I went to the bank the next morning with all the documents in hand. The woman sitting across from me looked confused as she flipped through the files. She checked IDs, dates, signatures, timestamps, things I had no control over while I was deployed. When she finally looked up at me, she frowned and said words that made everything inside me sink. Sir, these were signed in person. In person. My name. My identity. Used in person while I was in another country. That meant someone walked into these offices pretending to be me. Someone had the confidence to sit there face to face with a loan officer and sign $500,000 of debt under my name without flinching. The bank representative asked if I wanted to file a fraud report. I nodded, but my mind wasn't focused on the process. It was focused on one thing. Who had access to my documents? Who had my ID? Who even knew how to imitate my signature? There were only 3 possibilities. 3 people who fit every detail. 3 people who could have done this while smiling in my face during video calls, pretending everything was fine. When I finally drove to my family home later that week, the air in the house was too calm. Too normal. Nobody looked guilty. Nobody looked scared. They acted like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just discovered a massive debt they'd piled onto my shoulders while I was miles away serving. I watched their faces carefully. I studied every expression, every glance, every nervous swallow. And then my brother slipped. Just one sentence. Just one little detail he shouldn't have known. That was all it took for everything to unravel. But instead of confessing, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. And what he said next shocked me more than the debt itself. Because it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about something bigger. Something they kept from me for years. Something they were terrified I'd uncover once I started digging. And in that moment, standing in the middle of my childhood living room, I realized the debt was only the beginning. The real secret, what my family had been hiding all this time, was so much deeper than I ever imagined. And what I discovered next changed everything. The room felt smaller the longer I stood there. My brother shifted in his seat, tapping his foot against the edge of the coffee table like he wanted to run but didn't want to look guilty doing it. My mom kept smoothing the same spot on her shirt, avoiding my eyes every time I tried to meet them. My aunt pretended to be focused on her phone, but I could see her hand shaking just a little. It was clear all three of them were hiding something. And not something small, something heavy enough to make the air feel tense. I didn't speak at first. I wanted them to feel the silence. I wanted them to feel the weight of the truth pressing in. The truth they'd been hiding for who knows how long. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since I opened that first letter. Who signed my name? My brother didn't answer. My aunt didn't lift her head. And my mom, she finally looked at me but her eyes were tired, like she'd been carrying the guilt for months and had just run out of energy. She opened her mouth to speak but my brother cut her off. Why are you making this such a big deal? I felt something snap inside me, not anger loud enough to explode but a quiet, controlled kind of anger that makes everything sharper. I stepped closer to him and he flinched slightly, like he was preparing for a confrontation he knew he deserved. A big deal? I repeated. It's $500,000. In my name. While I was deployed. He swallowed hard but still tried to look tough. It didn't work. Not when the truth was written all over him. My mom interrupted before he could respond. It wasn't supposed to go this far. We were planning to fix it before you came home. I stared at her, trying to understand how she expected me to believe that. Fix it how? I asked. With what money? You couldn't even pay the electric bill last year. Her lip trembled just a little, and she glanced toward my aunt as if she expected support. But my aunt kept her eyes down, pretending she didn't hear a thing. That was the moment I realized she was involved more deeply than she wanted me to know. I wanted answers. Real ones. Not excuses. Not half-truths. Not vague explanations that only made the situation worse. And so I pressed. The story came out slowly like they were pulling it through tight teeth. My mom explained that the house needed repairs. She said the roof had been leaking for months, the foundation was cracking, and the insurance company refused to cover the costs. My brother added that the job market had been bad and money was tight. My aunt, after a long moment of silence, admitted she pushed for the loan because we had no other choice. But every explanation they gave was like a patch on a massive hole. It didn't fix anything. It didn't justify signing my name. It didn't explain the credit cards. It didn't explain the car loan. And it definitely didn't explain why they kept all of it hidden from me for over a year. I listened carefully. I didn't interrupt. I wanted them to talk because sometimes people reveal things when they get comfortable explaining themselves. And sure enough, something slipped. My aunt mentioned something about the situation, and then immediately tried to cover it up by changing the subject. But it was too late. What situation? I asked. She froze for a second too long. That was when the uneasiness inside me grew stronger, and for the first time, I wondered if this wasn't just about money. Maybe the debt was only the visible part of something much bigger. Something they'd been keeping under wraps long before I deployed. My brother stood up like he was ready to leave the room. I blocked his path and looked him dead in the eyes. What situation? He sighed, rubbed his face and muttered, "It's not my place to say." That line told me everything. It was his place. They just didn't want me to know. Before I could ask again, my mom's voice cracked as she whispered, "Just leave it alone for now." But I couldn't. I've spent years working in environments where information saves lives. Secrets get people hurt. Hidden details are dangerous. And right now, everything in my gut told me that whatever they were hiding went deeper than a few forged signatures. Later that night, after leaving the house, I sat in my car for a long time thinking about everything they said, and everything they didn't say. The numbers didn't add up. The stories didn't fit together. And their reactions, the fear in their voices, the panic in their eyes, it told me something was off. So I started making calls. I reached out to the loan company first. I asked for copies of the original paperwork, timestamps, camera footage, anything they legally could provide. The representative wasn't very helpful at first, but when I mentioned fraud, everything changed. They promised to pull the files and send what they could. Next, I called the credit card company. Same story, they opened a fraud case and promised investigations. Then I called the bank that handled the renovation loan. And that was where things got interesting. The woman on the phone hesitated before answering one simple question. Who provided the ID for the loan? She waited too long before responding, and when she finally did, her answer made my skin crawl. It was a physical ID. A real ID. With your name and photo. My ID. But I had mine with me overseas the entire time. I checked my wallet immediately, almost panicking as I looked for it, even though I knew it should be there. And it was my actual ID. But that meant only one thing. Someone had made a copy. A perfect one. A duplicate. My head spun with questions. When did they do it? How did they get my information? Who helped them? And why go so far? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just desperate borrowing. This was calculated. Planned. Someone went out of their way to make sure everything looked real. Someone wanted full access to my identity. And the scariest part? I still didn't know the real reason why. The next day, I visited a friend who worked in cybersecurity. I showed him the documents. He pointed out details I missed, little things that proved whoever forged my signature had practiced it multiple times. He also noticed that multiple accounts used the same phone number and email address. Not mine. Someone else's. Someone connected. By now, suspicion was turning into a solid shape. A shape that looked exactly like one of my own family members. When I drove back to the house again, I wasn't just hoping for answers. I was determined to get them. I didn't care if they were scared. I didn't care if it hurt feelings. I didn't care if they didn't want to talk. I needed the truth. But when I opened the door, the house was too quiet. Too still. My mom's eyes were red. My aunt was pacing. And my brother, he wasn't there at all. Before I could ask anything, my mom whispered, "He left." Left? What did that even mean? She avoided my eyes again. "He knew you were going to find out," she said softly. "Find out what?" I asked. Her voice cracked. "It's not just the debt." I felt a cold wave roll over my skin. She took a shaky breath. "There's something your brother did, something we tried to fix before you came home." That was when I knew the real story, the real betrayal, hadn't even begun yet. And what came next would change everything I thought I knew about my own family. My mom's voice trembled like she was holding years' worth of stress in her throat, and for a moment I just stared at her, trying to read the truth hiding behind her eyes. She wasn't usually like this. My mother was the kind of woman who held everything together even when the world was falling apart. For her to look this shaken meant whatever she was about to reveal wasn't small. It wasn't just another bad decision or another desperate attempt to solve a problem. This was something deeper, something they'd buried for so long that even mentioning it now was tearing her apart. I stayed quiet. I didn't sit down. I didn't blink. I just waited. My aunt stopped pacing and stood near the window, her arms crossed tight against her chest like she was trying to protect herself from the truth as much as I was trying to uncover it. Her usual attitude was gone. No sarcasm. No stubborn confidence. Just fear. She murmured, "We thought we had more time." More time for what? My stomach tightened. My mom finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your brother, he got involved with something he shouldn't have. Something that got out of control." I felt a rush of anger and concern twist together. "What does that have to do with putting $500,000 in debt under my name?" "It's connected," she said. "More than you know." But she didn't explain. Not really. Instead, she went quiet again like she was fighting with herself about how much to say. I pressed harder. "Where did he go?" "You said he left." My aunt finally answered. "He said he needed to disappear for a while. He knew you were digging too deep." "Digging into what?" Neither of them answered. That silence felt heavier than the debt. Heavier than the forged signatures. Heavier than anything else they'd said so far. I walked deeper into the living room and picked up the folder I'd left on the table the day before, filled with loan documents, credit card statements, notices, and signatures. I spread them out again, forcing them to look. "One of you is going to explain how all of this," I said calmly, "connects to whatever secret you're still hiding." My mom covered her mouth with her hand and tears filled her eyes. My aunt looked away again. And something in my chest tightened because I realized, this wasn't just guilt. This was fear. A real, quiet fear that came from dealing with something far more complicated than money. I softened my voice. Just tell me. My mom shook her head. It's not safe. Not safe. Those two words told me there were layers to this situation I hadn't understood yet. And that's when the real dread settled in. The kind that came from knowing your family isn't just hiding mistakes, they're hiding danger. I spent the rest of the day trying to piece together clues. When they refused to say anything more, I left and started digging on my own. I checked my brother's social media, his old messages, even old receipts he'd left in the house months ago. That's when I noticed something strange. Over the past 2 years, he'd spent a lot of time in locations that made no sense. Places outside the city, random offices, meetings at odd hours. And there were cash withdrawals. Large ones. Not enough to be suspicious on their own, but the timing was too precise. Always close to dates that matched loan applications or new credit cards in my name. It felt like following a trail that someone tried hard to erase but forgot a few crumbs along the way. A little later, I got a call back from one of the banks. The representative told me they found something unusual and needed me to confirm a detail. When they sent over the file, I opened it expecting more signatures or dates. But it was something else entirely. A copy of the identification used to secure one of the largest loans. It wasn't just a fake version of my ID. It was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfect that didn't come from a cheap printer or a shady quick copy spot. Someone paid for this. Someone invested effort and money into creating a flawless second identity for me. Why would my own family go that far? The question wouldn't leave my mind. Later, I drove to a friend who knew more about this type of stuff. Someone who worked with documents and security checks. After looking through the ID, he said something that froze my whole body. This wasn't made by an amateur. Whoever created this knows what they're doing. And they had access to systems most people don't. Which meant this wasn't just family pressure or a stupid mistake. Someone my brother dealt with had the skills to clone an identity. And suddenly my family's fear made sense. They weren't just scared of what I would find. They were scared of who might come looking next. That night I returned home and found an envelope pushed under my door. No name. No stamp. No address. Just a single piece of paper inside with one sentence written in messy handwriting. Stop asking questions. No signature. No explanation. Nothing else. I felt a cold chill run through me. It wasn't from my family. They wouldn't threaten me. They wouldn't leave a message like that. This came from someone else. Someone who didn't want me digging into whatever my brother got tangled with. I went back to my mom's house the next morning and showed her the note. Her face went pale. She grabbed the note like it burned her fingers. I told him this would happen, she whispered. Who? I asked. She hesitated. My aunt spoke instead, her voice low. He wasn't supposed to get involved with those people. He thought they'd help him fix things. He thought they'd let him walk away. Walk away from what? I asked. My mom looked at me with eyes full of regret. From something he started years ago. Something he never told you about. Something we should have stopped when we had the chance. I wanted to shake them for answers, but I held myself back. If he was in trouble, why drag me into it? Why risk my entire future? My aunt sighed. He said you were the only one with good credit. The only one they would trust. The only way to get the money he needed. I felt sick. So he used my identity to pay off someone? My mom didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it either. But the look in her eyes told me enough. And yet, something still didn't add up. If the debt was to pay off someone dangerous, why was my brother still hiding? Why did no one want to tell me everything? Why did the threat feel so personal? Later that evening, I drove past our old neighborhood, trying to clear my mind. I noticed a car in my rearview mirror that seemed to follow every turn I made. Slow. Steady. Not obvious, but not accidental either. When I sped up slightly, the car did the same. When I changed lanes, it changed lanes. My throat tightened. Whoever sent that message, whoever my brother got mixed up with, they were watching. And the worst part? I still didn't know the full story. I didn't know why they wanted me to stop. I didn't know who they were. And I didn't know how deep this went. But one thing was becoming clear with every passing hour. This wasn't just about debt anymore. It was about something that could destroy my family if I didn't uncover it in time. And even though every part of me wanted to walk away, I couldn't. Not until I knew the truth. The car behind me stayed close enough that I could feel its presence, like a shadow glued to my bumper. I tried not to panic, but my heart thumped at a pace that made my palms sweat. The streetlights flashed across my windshield in quick beats, and every time I checked my mirror, the same dark-colored sedan stayed just far enough back to pretend it wasn't following, yet close enough to keep me uncomfortable. I didn't recognize the car. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a family friend. And it definitely wasn't a coincidence. I made 3 turns, left, right, left, cutting through back roads I knew only from childhood memories of biking around the neighborhood. The car mirrored each move. When I sped up, it sped up. When I slowed down, it matched my pace. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Whoever was behind that wheel wasn't just watching. They wanted me to know they were watching. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, nearly making me jump. I glanced down long enough to see a new message from an unknown number. "You're making this worse for everyone." My chest tightened as I read it again and again. The words weren't just a warning, they were a threat wrapped in calmness. Someone out there thought I was close to something. Close enough to scare them. Close enough that they felt the need to haunt my every move. I turned into a crowded gas station, hoping the public space would scare off whoever was trailing me. As I parked near the pumps, the sedan slowed at the entrance, hesitated for a moment, then drove past like it had never been following at all. I sat in my car for several minutes, forcing myself to breathe normally, waiting until I felt steady enough to move again. When I finally got home, the house felt smaller and darker than usual, like the walls were absorbing the tension I carried. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it for a long moment, letting the quiet settle around me. But even in the silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching from a distance. I spread the documents across the table again, searching for patterns. My brother's sloppy mistakes. My aunt's hidden fear. My mom's silence. The fake ID. The car that followed me. The warning note. The uncomfortable truth that someone had wanted money badly enough to risk everything. But the deeper I looked, the more something felt wrong. The timeline didn't fit. The loan amounts didn't fit. Even my brother's behavior didn't fully fit. This wasn't just recklessness. This wasn't just desperation. Something else was going on. Something bigger. I went through my brother's old notebooks, old texts, screenshots he'd forgotten to delete from a shared computer account. Most of it was useless, random messages, job listings, old passwords. But then something caught my eye. A string of messages he exchanged with someone saved as D in his phone. The messages were short and tense. "I told you I'd have it by the end of the month. Don't bring him into this. I said I'm working on it. Stop threatening my family. We'll get the money. Just give me time." Every message sent a chill through me. My brother wasn't doing this for fun. He wasn't doing it for luxury. He wasn't even doing it because he thought he deserved the money. He was doing it because someone was pressuring him. Someone dangerous. I scrolled further, and my stomach dropped when I reached a message that looked like it had been sent around the time my first debt letter arrived. "Use his name. He's overseas, they won't catch it." My breath hitched. Someone told him to use my name. Someone knew I was deployed. Someone knew I wouldn't be home for months. My brother didn't start this alone. He had help. Or worse, he was forced into it. I slammed the laptop shut and sat there in silence, trying to steady my breathing. I kept seeing my brother's face in my mind, scared, worn, guilty, exhausted. He wasn't just afraid of me finding out. He was afraid of who was holding his strings. Just then a car door slammed outside. I stood up slowly and moved toward the window. A figure stood by the sidewalk, dark clothes, hood up, looking straight at my house. Not moving. Not speaking. Just standing there like they were waiting for me to look back. I stepped away from the window instinctively. A moment later, footsteps echoed on the porch. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I approached the door. I hesitated, unsure if opening it was smart. But then came a soft knock, 3 slow taps. I swallowed hard, opened the door an inch and looked out. No one was there. Just an envelope lying flat on my welcome mat. My hands shook slightly as I bent down to pick it up. I carried it back inside and opened it carefully. This time the message was clearer. Darker. "You're close enough. Stop now before someone gets hurt." Someone gets hurt. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just someone watching me. This wasn't just someone trying to scare me. This was someone willing to cross lines to keep their secret buried. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to my mom's house. When she opened the door, her eyes widened at the panic on my face. I pushed the envelope into her hands. "Tell me the truth," I said. "All of it. Right now." My aunt stood behind her, pale as ever. The air inside the house felt thick, like none of us could breathe properly. "You should have stopped digging," my aunt whispered. "This is exactly what we were afraid of." "What are you afraid of?" I demanded. Neither answered. Instead, my mom sank into a chair like her legs had given out. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't just sad, they were terrified. She pressed her hands together tightly, like she was praying for the strength to speak. "Your brother? He didn't mean for any of this to touch you," she said. "He tried to protect you. But he got involved with people who don't forgive. People who don't let go." I stepped closer. "What people?" My aunt shook her head. "People who think you now owe them answers." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "And your brother?" my mom whispered. "He didn't just run. He was taken." Taken. The word hit me so hard I couldn't breathe for a moment. I stared at her in disbelief as she wiped her tears, shaking uncontrollably. My aunt leaned against the wall, covering her face like she couldn't stand to watch the truth unfold. My voice came out hoarse. "Where is he?" My mom looked up at me, her voice breaking. "We don't know. They contacted us once. They said we had one chance to fix what he did." "One chance?" I repeated. "By putting debt in my name?" "It wasn't supposed to be that much," my aunt whispered. "They kept raising what he owed. He thought using your name would buy us time." I staggered back slightly. Time for what? Time for who? Every question spiraled into a darker one. And then my mom said the words that made everything snap into place. "They don't care about the money anymore. They want something else." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" I whispered. She looked at me with eyes full of fear. "You." The room went silent. Even the air felt like it stopped moving. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been circling around all along. This wasn't just about what my brother did. This was about what they planned to do next. And I had no idea how close I already was to being pulled into the same trap. Here's the continuation, keeping the tone simple, human, clean for YouTube, and steering clear of any disallowed content. For a moment, everything inside the house felt too still. The argument from earlier kept replaying in my mind, and the strange tension hanging between all of us refused to settle. I kept thinking things were finally coming together, that maybe the hardest part was behind me. But the uneasiness in my stomach wouldn't leave. It felt like something else was waiting, something bigger that I hadn't seen coming. I walked into the living room and noticed the front door wasn't fully closed. A thin line of light shone through the crack, and a cold draft brushed past me. I knew I'd locked it earlier. I remembered checking it twice. When I reached for the handle, I heard faint footsteps outside, like someone backing away slowly. My heart skipped. I pushed the door open and looked around, but the street was quiet. No cars passing, no neighbors outside, just that heavy silence that made everything feel wrong. I closed the door again, but the tension didn't go away. Instead, it grew heavier. I went back to the table, and that's when I saw it, a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. It sat right next to my phone, placed neatly like someone wanted to make sure I wouldn't miss it. My chest tightened as I opened it. The message was short, handwritten, and the sharp, slanted handwriting was too familiar. "I know everything. And I'm not done." I felt the room tilt for a second. The message didn't make sense, not at first. I thought we'd handled the situation. I thought all the secrets were already out in the open. But that one sentence changed everything. It meant someone else was involved. Someone who had been watching, waiting, and gathering information I didn't even know existed. I took a slow step back, feeling the weight of the threat settle in. Just when I thought the conflict had reached its breaking point, another layer was unfolding right under my feet. The letter wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge. Whoever wrote it wanted me to react, to worry, to panic. But the worst part? I recognized the handwriting. It belonged to someone I never expected. Someone who had always acted like they were on my side. Someone who had every reason to stay quiet, yet every reason to want control. Before I could process it, my phone lit up. An unknown number. One message. "Check your back room." I froze. The back room was the one place in the house I rarely used. A storage space, cluttered, forgotten, and always kept shut. I didn't want to go there. My instincts told me not to. But curiosity and fear pushed me forward. Every step down the hallway felt heavier than the last, like I was walking into something that would change everything again. When I reached the door, I noticed it was slightly open. Just a few inches. And I knew I hadn't left it like that. I pushed it gently. The hinges creaked, and the dim light from the hallway spilled into the room. At first, I saw nothing but boxes. Old clothes. Random things we'd stuffed inside over the years. But then I spotted it, another note taped to a box near the back. My heartbeat jumped as I picked it up. This time, the message was even shorter. "You missed something." That was when I realized the truth. Somebody had been inside my house longer than I knew. Someone had gone through my things, searched through my life, and planted messages like they were setting up a game for me to follow. The stakes were no longer just about the conflict from earlier. Now there was someone new in the mix, someone who had power, information, and access. Someone who wasn't afraid to show they were 2 steps ahead. And for the first time, I felt the real danger wasn't in what had already happened, but in what was coming next. I stepped backward, holding the note tight, trying to steady my breathing. Everything I thought I understood was shifting again. If this person truly knew everything, then the secret I thought was buried had somehow resurfaced. And if they weren't done, that meant the next move wasn't mine, it was theirs. And it was coming fast. I stood there in the back room, holding that note like it was burning through my fingers. The house felt too quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes you second-guess every sound you thought you heard. I kept thinking about the handwriting, that familiar style I wished I didn't recognize. It belonged to someone I had trusted more than I should have, someone who'd been close enough to watch everything unfold without ever being noticed. I stepped back into the hallway, my mind racing, and that's when I heard the soft thud of a door closing somewhere inside the house. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. A chill shot through me. Every instinct told me to turn around and leave, but I forced myself to move forward. I needed to end this. I needed answers. I followed the sound to the living room. The moment I stepped in, I saw someone standing in the corner, half hidden in the shadows. My heart jumped, but when they stepped into the light, I felt something even stronger than fear, shock. It was the one person I never thought would betray me. Someone who'd smiled in my face, offered support, pretended to care. And now they were standing there with a look that didn't match the person I thought I knew. I told you, they said softly, I know everything. I tried to stay calm. What? Why do all this? Why sneak around? Why the notes? Why make everything worse? They shrugged like the answer was obvious. Because I was always in the background watching you rebuild your life. You kept winning. You kept getting stronger. And you never noticed who helped you get there or who was keeping your secrets safe. So I decided to remind you. It didn't make sense at first, but then the pieces started falling together. They weren't trying to destroy me, they were trying to control how everything ended. They wanted to be the one who pulled the strings, the one who felt powerful after being overlooked for too long. But before I could respond, they pulled something from their pocket. For a split second, my breath caught, but then I realized it wasn't anything dangerous. It was a stack of papers, documents, receipts, even photos. Evidence. Proof of what had really been happening behind the scenes. They tossed the papers onto the table. You blamed the wrong people, they said. You thought the conflict came from them. But it came from me. I was the one feeding information, creating tension, making sure things never settled. The truth hit me hard. All the arguments, all the misunderstandings, all the moments that felt too perfectly timed, they hadn't been coincidences. They had planned everything. They had pushed everyone just enough so the cracks would show. But the biggest twist came when they added quietly, and I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I wanted you to depend on me. You always depended on everyone else, but never on me. Hearing that felt heavier than anything else. It wasn't revenge, it was desperation. They wanted to be needed even if it meant breaking everything first. I took a deep breath and stepped closer. If you wanted to be seen, I said, you could have just talked to me. You didn't have to create all this chaos. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in their eyes. Maybe they hadn't expected me to stay calm. Maybe they thought I'd fall apart the way they planned. Before anything else could happen, the front door swung open and someone else stepped in. Someone who had been tangled in this conflict from the beginning. Their sudden arrival shifted everything. They saw the papers on the table, saw us standing there, and their expression changed instantly. What's going on? They demanded. The person in front of me turned sharply, startled, and that one moment broke whatever control they thought they had. Everything they'd been hiding came crashing into the open. Their plans, their secrets, their manipulation, it all unraveled right there in front of us. I finally spoke the truth out loud. They were behind all of it. Every problem, every message, every setup. The room erupted with emotion, shock, frustration, disbelief. The person I trusted had no choice but to admit what they'd done. And for the first time, I saw the exhaustion behind their actions. They weren't the villain they pretended to be, they were someone who felt invisible for too long and made the worst choices to feel important. The conflict ended right there with honesty I never expected. And just when I thought the tension had finally broken, the final twist arrived. As we gathered the papers, one envelope fell out, one none of us had seen before. It wasn't written in the same familiar handwriting. It wasn't from them. It was from someone else. The note inside was short, simple, and chilling in its own way. You solved the wrong problem. The real story hasn't started yet. In that moment, I realized the person standing in front of me wasn't the only one watching. And the truth that scared me most? Someone out there still knew more than all of us. When I first picked up that final envelope, I expected my hands to shake, but they didn't. Maybe it was because I had already been pushed through so many twists that nothing could surprise me anymore. Or maybe I finally understood that the only way to take back control of my life was to face whatever came next without fear. I opened the envelope slowly, letting the moment breathe. The others watched in silence, waiting for something explosive, something that would send us spiraling again. But the truth inside wasn't another trap. It wasn't another game. It was closure, just not the kind any of us saw coming. The note was from my father. Not the version of him shaped by other people's memories or by my own frustration, but the version who'd always tried to do the right thing even when he fell short. He wrote the letter before he passed away, months before any of the drama started. He knew things were messy. He knew our family wasn't perfect. He knew about the debt, at least some of it, and he knew there was someone in the family, a person he didn't name, who was capable of letting things spiral out of control. The letter wasn't about fear, it was about warning. He told me that if anything ever looked off, if I ever sensed that something wasn't adding up, I should come home and look deeper. He wrote that the truth had a way of hiding in plain sight and that our family carried secrets nobody talked about. What he didn't know was how far things would eventually go. What he didn't know was how those secrets would explode long after he was gone. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. The room stayed quiet, everyone processing what it meant. The person who had tried to manipulate the situation earlier looked almost defeated, like they had finally run out of the strength to keep pretending. The other person who had walked in, the one who'd been tangled in this drama since the beginning, sat down slowly, rubbing their temples as if the last week had aged them 10 years. I finally broke the silence. "This ends now," I said softly, not out of anger but out of exhaustion. "We're not doing this cycle anymore. Not the lies, not the guilt, not the blame." No one argued. No one tried to defend themselves. It was like the air had shifted. All the tension, all the secrets, all the built-up resentment, it didn't disappear but it stopped growing. And maybe that was enough. I spent the next few days sorting through the mess. The fraudulent debt got reported. Investigations were opened. The banks took my deployment orders seriously, and like I hoped, the burden started lifting off my shoulders piece by piece. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. And progress was something I hadn't felt in a long time. The family didn't magically fix itself overnight. That kind of healing takes time, honesty, and a willingness to face the ugly parts. Some relationships were too damaged to repair. Some needed distance. Some needed long conversations that hurt before they helped. I didn't sugarcoat anything, and for once neither did they. The person who had orchestrated most of the chaos, the one who wanted to feel important by pulling strings behind my back, finally apologized. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was plain, simple, and real. They told me they never planned for things to get so big. They never expected their small lies to hit me overseas at the worst possible time. They just wanted to matter. I accepted the apology not because everything was forgiven, but because holding on to anger would have kept me tied to the past. And I needed to move forward. I needed to breathe again. I needed to reclaim my life. But the biggest surprise came when the second envelope arrived weeks later. This one wasn't dramatic. It wasn't mysterious. It came from the attorney who had handled my father's things. Inside was a small note he left specifically for me, along with a sealed document. The note said, "You will face storms I will never see. But I raised you to know that storms don't end you, they shape you. You'll know what to do when the time comes." I opened the sealed document expecting something heavy. But it wasn't debt, secrets, or problems. It was a deed. My father had secretly bought a small piece of land years ago, intending to give it to me when I returned home. He never got the chance, but he wanted it to be something that reminded me I always had a place to rebuild from, no matter how chaotic life became. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I had almost forgotten: hope. I visited the land a few days later. It wasn't much. Just a quiet piece of open space with a gentle breeze and a view that made you feel lighter. And standing there, I realized something important. My family may have dragged me through chaos, conflict, betrayal, manipulation, everything that comes with money, fear, and insecurity, but I still had a foundation of my own. Something untouched. Something untouched by their mistakes. Something I could build on. That moment gave me clarity. The debt wasn't the real story. The lies weren't the real story. The drama, the secrets, even the twist, it was all part of something bigger. The real story was about taking back control of my life. It was about understanding that even the people you love can lose their way. It was about learning that family doesn't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty doesn't always come from the places you expect. It was about letting go of the need to fix everyone else and finally choosing to fix myself. By the time everything settled, I realized the truth I needed the most. I didn't return home to expose anyone. I returned home to find myself again. And I did. The land became a new beginning. I spent weekends clearing it, not because I needed to, but because it felt good to build something with my own hands, something no one could sign my name onto without permission. It was peaceful, grounding, and real. As the months passed, some family members reached out. Some relationships quietly faded. Some slowly healed. I didn't force anything. I let everything unfold naturally the way life should. The final unexpected twist came not from another letter or another secret, but from something much simpler, a sense of peace. A kind of peace that only comes after you've walked through something heavy and survived it. I realized that the truth, no matter how messy, always leads somewhere better when you face it instead of running from it. And that's the lesson I hold on to now. No matter how much chaos life throws at you, you have the power to choose where your story goes next. My story didn't end with the debt. It didn't end with betrayal. It didn't end with confrontation. It ended with freedom. And that made every painful chapter worth turning.